Good evening, dear viewers, and welcome to our English news of the radio television of Djibouti. Here are our headlines for this evening. At the presidential palace, the head of state received the Saudi delegation. Concerning the natural disasters, the head of state receives the members of the government in charge of the RSEC plan. Now, international news: historical mobilization in Paris and Rome on violence against women. The President of the Republic, His Excellency Ismail Mergeli, received this afternoon at the Presidential Palace a high-level delegation from the Saudi Fund for Development, led by the Vice President of the Fund, Mr. Khalid bin Sulaiman Al Qudairi. During the meeting, the head of state and the delegation of the Saudi Fund for Development discussed brotherly relations and cooperation between the Republic of Djibouti and the Saudi Arabia. Also at the heart of the meeting were the various projects financed by the Saudi Fund for Development in Djibouti, including the Supreme Court's construction equipment project, the Housing Rights Foundation support project, and the Saudi Wild Drilling and Rural Development program in Africa. The Saudi delegation was introduced to the President by the Minister of Economy and Finances in charge of Industry, Mr. Yas Mousadwale. The President congratulated the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for its efforts to support the Djibouti government's efforts to achieve the desired economic and social development in our country. The Minister of Economy and Finance in charge of Industry, Yas Mousadwale, and the Djibouti ambassador to Riyadh, Mr. Diadin Said Makrama, attended the meeting. It should be noted that Djibouti's relations with Saudi Arabia have developed remarkably in recent times, thanks to the wise leadership of the two countries represented by the President Ismail Mergeli and the guardian of the two holy mosques, King Salman bin Abdulaziz. In an interview with national television, the Vice President and Managing Director of the Saudi Fund for Development, Dr. Khalid bin Sulaiman Al Qudairi, expressed his thanks and gratitude to the President for the warm and welcome and hospitality extended to him in the accompanying delegation, noting that his talks with the President focused on joint cooperation between Djibouti and the Kingdom. For his part, the Minister of Economy and Finances pointed out that the delegation of the Saudi Fund for Development discussed with His Excellency the President of the Republic on the communication of understanding concluded today on financing the construction and equipping for the Supreme Court in Djibouti and the project of supporting the Right to Housing Foundation for the President of the Republic, in addition to the Saudi program for drilling wells and rural development in Africa. He stressed about the depth of the fraternal relations and the fruitful cooperation between the two brotherly countries, Saudi Arabia and the Republic of Djibouti. The President of the Republic, His Excellency Ismail Mergeli, held an emergency meeting with the members of the government in charge of emergency management plan. The meeting was attended by the Prime Minister Abdul Qadir Kamil Mohammed, the Minister of Interior, Mr. Mumin Ahmed Sheikh, Minister of Communication in charge of Post and Telecommunication, Mr. Ridwan Abdallah Badon, Minister of Health, Mr. Muhammad Warsam Madiriye, Minister of Culture, and Mr. Muhammad Ahmed Awali, Minister of Budget, Mr. Abdul Karim Adan Sher, and Minister of Defense in charge of relations with the Parliament, Mr. Hassan Umar Mohammed, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Muhammad Ali Yusuf, Minister of Housing, Mrs. Amina Abdi Aden, Secretary of State in charge of decentralization, Hamadou Mohammed Aramis, Chief of the General Staff of the Armed Forces and Chief of the National Gendarmerie, the Commander of the Republican Guard and the National Police, and the Executive Secretariat for Risk and Disaster Management. This meeting aims to guide the President of the Republic's important decisions and action. It was marked by the speech of the President of the Republic, who instructed the Minister of the Budget to allocate 100 million franc Djibouti for the victims of this natural disaster. The President of the Republic, Mr. Ismail Mergeli, stressed in his intervention the need for concerted efforts of all parties and civil and military bodies in order to enable the population to overcome the repercussion of floods caused by the rain. The President made an inspiring diagnosis of the natural disaster relief and assistance system and called for lessons to be learned from this disaster in order to better respond to a disaster of a high degree than the one we have just experienced. The President of the Republic said with different scenarios, very different scenarios, no lessons have been learned from previous floods. Equipment must be constantly maintained and checked. The scenario in which we have to do, we must continue, he said, to do all the time, said the President. In the event of a fire, a disaster, a foresight case has not worked. On the contrary, people dispersed, everyone was on their own. Now we want a damage chart first, then it up to the people in charge to set up a whole system to deal not only with this level, but with something more significant, the President said, and to carry out regular exercises so that we can deal with it. We use, he said, the hypothesis to say if this happened to us, how we are going to react. If we have any fire, he said, how do we deal with them? If the earthquake occurs, now we are going to face it. Which services should go first and which are in second? The President said how we can work with these conditions. Sanitation service, fire and weather, armed and defense forces, roads and hygiene. However, for the new measures, the Ministries of Housing, Habitat and Urban Planning must assume their responsibility. The President of the Republic concluded his speech by instructing the Minister of the Budget to allocate 100 million Djibouti franc for the victims of this natural disaster. In a short intervention of the Minister of the Interior, Mr. Moumin Ahmed Sheikh, he stressed we discussed ways to confront this crisis and identify the sanction of water from the streets and roads, and assigned us these attacks on the management, the civil defense, sanctions stagnant water in the neighborhoods of Djibouti, the capital, until the coming days, he said. And for his part, the Prime Minister Abdul Qadir Kamil Mohammed said several days ago, we suffer from rainfall, and there are teams from all institutions, including sanitation, civil defense and road services, and all military institutions are working tirelessly to evacuate water despite the continued rain, and they were able to reduce water, and this will not take as much time, he said. As part of the emergency plan for disasters, the Ministry of Health conducted a large-scale campaign to provide medical services to those affected from the recent heavy rains. Medical teams toured the capital's districts to provide medical assistance to people affected by the rains during this process. The Ministry of Health supervised it, as well as medical treatment provided for the benefit of the population. The recent heavy rains in Djibouti City have caused quite a bit of material damage. As you can see in the pictures, damaged power poles and high voltage cables ripped off, road cracks, and a bridge cut in half in the town of Bulbela. Some homes have been cut off from electricity. A group of residents of the Hodan city have mobilized to repair this damaged pavement, and this deterioration is a result of this heavy rainfall in Djibouti. It should be recalled that a crisis unit has been set up by the government, and a toll-free number 1516 has been made available to the population for emergency reporting. The Executive Secretary of the Intergovernmental Authority of Development, IGAD, presented this morning to the Governor of Djibouti a check of $50,000 to support the efforts of the government of Djibouti to provide assistance to the people affected by the heavy rains in Djibouti, the capital, and the interior. The rain in Djibouti, the capital, caused some serious material damage from the floods and was housed in schools and community development centers. The Executive Secretary expressed the authorities' desire to support the government and the people of Djibouti. The humanitarian response came after the government's call during the crisis cell meeting held on Saturday for its partners, praising the efforts exerted by the government of Djibouti and reaffirming the commitment of the Intergovernmental Authority on the development and solidarity with the government as a result of these floods, which hampered traffic and caused serious damage to citizens. Following heavy losses from heavy rains in the country, Republican Guard elements enthusiastically provided aid to people affected by the rains. This step follows the launch of the President of the Republic, Mr. Ismail Omar Guelleh, the emergency plan to address this crisis in order to effectively provide humanitarian support and assistance under the leadership of the Republican Guard and under the Colonel Mohammed Jama, commander of the Republican Guard, took the necessary measures and spared no effort in the performance of their duties as well as support for the affected. In this regard, the elements of the Republican Guard today provided assistance to the affected families and sheltered them in various schools and community development centers. Djibouti Coast Guard has been mobilized since the beginning of the weather and the launch of the ORSEC plan. Several pipes have been installed in various flooded areas of the capital. The commander of the Coast Guard, Mohammed, and the sub-prefect of the 3rd arrondissement, Mrs. Fatuma Ibrahim Ali, observed firsthand the damage caused by the wadi around the Umbuli River. The residents of the Vietnam neighborhood have all been mobilized alongside the police, including the Coast Guard, which gives them considerable support both for families who have suffered losses of their material assets. The damage is currently reported in the vicinity of the wadi of 2 missing people and 1 dead body found in Mumbuli. The commander of the Coast Guard welcomed the effort that the officers were able to make on the spot and urged families around the wadi to be extremely careful not to let their children play on the surroundings of the wadi. Disaster relief is on the rise. The Ryan Shopping Center, not yet opened, has served as refugee for families affected by the weathers. These relief efforts, organized by members of the government following the launch of the ORSEC plan, have enabled many families to overcome this disaster with dignity. Many other institutions have also participated in these national solidarity actions. The Secretary of State for Youth and Sports will therefore like to thank all the goodwills that is involved directly or indirectly in the implementation of this solidarity. And we have this information from the Health Department following the evaluation of the damage caused by the bad weather in the Family Care Center SMU2 located in District 6. Its closure is extended until Thursday, November 28, 2019 to ensure the continuity of medical services. Patients and their families will be cared for at the Center for Employee Care SME1. They all advise patients to visit the medical facilities closest to their place of residence to avoid waiting. In addition, the CNSS emergency is as usual operational 24 hours a day. The region of Tajora is not unaffected by the torrential rain that the country has experienced over the past 2 days. Heavy rainfall has been observed over the entire region. Some parts of the city were affected by the floods and others by this landslide and flooded the wadi, but without causing any human damage. The prefect of the region met with the heads of the various departments and the district chief to discuss the situation. Prefect Hassan Dabele moved to the different localities of the region to see the damage caused by this torrential rain. However, although some transport routes were damaged by flood, by the prefect of Tajora, Hassan Dabele, spared no effort to unblock the situation. The situation in the Arta region remains precarious. The weather situation has not improved. The rain continued to fall in this region from the coast of Demerjok to Karta, Arta and Wea. Landslides are observed in some areas. The prefect of Arta evacuated about 40 families in a very unstable area were housed at the school of Arta, where as well as a preventive measure. About 40 are also housed at the Wea school. In coastal areas, 150 families whose homes are completely underwater were housed at the school of Ali Une. The prefect of the region of Arta, Mohammed Sheikh Qasim, accompanied by the Energy Minister Yonis Ali Gedi and the president of the regional council, went to the bedside of the families displaced in schools to assess the needs and coordinate and quantify the relief of emergency rooms. Other natural disasters in the African continent. At least 24 people are reported to have died as a result of a landslide in eastern Kenya, western Poko. Residents were swept away by the landslide after heavy rains on Friday evening in the areas of Poko County Commissioner Apollo has said that 12 bodies, including 7 children, have been found and that the search is ongoing. Reports rescue operations have been interrupted because most bridges have been swept away and it's still raining heavily, according to Apollo West Poko County Commissioner. In the context of the organization by the Republic of Djibouti of the 75th session of the Executive Committee and the 42nd Conference of Presidents of the African Parliament Union, whose inaugural day will be held tomorrow, Monday, November 25th, at the People's Palace, the President of the National Assembly, Mohamed Ali Hamed, held a press briefing in his office on the same subject after an audience with the Speaker Mohamed Ali Hamed, the Secretary General of the Continental Organization, the Honorable Idi, reviewed the welcome and discussions he had with his host, detailing the ins and outs of the major African event that Djibouti will host tomorrow. And finally, 2 parliamentarians from the Djibouti National Group of the UPA spoke about the statutory activities of the UPA scheduled from 25 to 29 November, their impact on the promotion of our country, the ambitions of the national representation on the African scene, and the rights and advancement of women. The President of the National Assembly, Mr. Mohamed Ali Hamed, held a press briefing in his office talking about the importance of the organization by the Republic of Djibouti of the 75th session of the Executive Committee and the 42nd Conference of Presidents of the African Parliamentary Union. Sports, the under-20 national team beat Mauritius 3-0 in a friendly on Saturday evening. The under-20 national team has made a strong performance and proved its worth to win this friendly match. A large crowd of fans and football fans continue to support the national team. Moving on to the international news, and to close up this edition with tens of thousands have demonstrated in several French cities to protest against domestic violence against women that has killed more than 100 women since the beginning of the year. The demonstrations come 2 days before the International Day Against Violence Against Women. And that's all for this news. Thank you for being with us on the radio television of Djibouti, and have a good night.